So funny, like different people that I know keep popping into my mind when we think about this.
Me too.
I can't, I'm like,
It's like going to the chakra, it's like, oh,
our
she
love
must
labeling.
have that
I
chakra.
don't think it's our level of labeling, but it also, I think, gives like a certain level of empathy
Yeah,
and
totally.
understanding when
Yeah.
sometimes you, and compassion.
Uh-huh.
Like, if you have like one student in class that kind of just
Mhm.
takes some energy away from you, you know, or whatever, and then you start to realize, you're like, oh my gosh, that is very clear of,
I think this can help us as teachers to understand so much more about the people who come to class, you know, in a deeper level. So great.
And the compassion side is.
and it's like everyone's working, like everyone's here, like that person who's working on their root chakra, like thank goodness they're here and getting like connected to their physical body, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we have emotional intelligence.
I don't know how to word this one.
Yeah.
It's the tribe or team appealment. So doing yoga, doing group oriented or team oriented. I don't like to use team, but it appeals to them to be in an environment with
Community support.
Community, yeah.
Okay.
An emotional community support.
Yep. This is also the hub of our creativity. So when you're balanced, your creativity begins to flow.
And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but with that creativity, that's creativity in so many aspects, like financial, job, or educational, financial, not just artistic, but it's creativity of intelligence.
Yes, and ideas.
Of ideas. Okay.
Yeah. Big picture creativity. Okay, and then this is our ability to, so if we talked about in the week, how we find like frigidity, here we have like this ability to accept change, right? We're fluid. This is the water, right, chakra. So we're fluid, we're able to accept change and flow with change. To flow with change.
So this is the good chakra to keep balance.
So this is a good one. But think about it, when you are fluid to accept and to deal with change, how that kind of coincides with creativity as well, right? When you create all these harsh borders and systems for yourself, it's hard to feel that creativity, right? Like fluidity leads to fluidity in all aspects.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to get this all to fit with concepts I've always had and worked with, and it's more psychological based. So, so I have the belief that an introvert versus an extrovert, neither one is wrong. There's just people who are extroverts and others who are introverts, and both being perfectly social is how I view that. And so when I'm reading this, like the group team and communities thing, I mean, that just sounds like someone who has to not be an introvert.
No, I would say you recognize like on a more tangible way, like you show up to a yoga class and you recognize that there's shared energy in that space.
Okay.
And you appreciate the shared energy in that space, right? Without it necessarily there's unspoken emotional support for everyone being there.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
Like there's people who come to the studio and they've been coming for 3 years and they've maybe said 4 words. But they come in, they practice, they feel that, right? But they appreciate it and it feels good for them and they leave, but they don't sit around like we do and chat till the cows come home. But they
so
appreciate
you can be balanced.
Oh, I don't think these are specific to introvert or extrovert. And I think same with when we talk about social boundaries, right? Just because you fear because the excessive is to invade other people's social, the social boundaries of others, then that does not mean that because you're an extrovert, you can still be an introvert and
You're just a freak. Got it.
And I don't think that one is good or bad. I think that we idolize certain attributes of one, right? we idolize so much of like an extroverted personality type, right? And so, what? You do not.
Well, it's like you
As
say
a
to kids, like,
sucker.
oh, she's shy, she's sensitive, like in a negative way.
Yeah.
You know, or she's so emotional.
And you're like, we all should be working on that emotional intelligence a little more. Okay, so when we talk about the balance too, the other thing is what we find is nurturing. So the ability to nurture. And to experience pleasure without overdoing it, as we found with it excessive. Okay? So, what do we think about in classes when we're working with students? How do we bring these aspects to classes?
I guess just giving them a little bit of freedom in the practice to actually flow like water, right? Not being very rigid or giving very specific instructions.
Are giving room for exploration, but safe exploration, right? So there's a balance. And I think that's what's important, is that there's a balance, right? You can find that watery quality without having to make multiple shapes, right? You can move your hip up and down to find what it feels like to find freedom in your lower back, right? You can move your arm in different ways with breath until you feel space across the chest. Like there's ways in which, so I don't want this to seem like this means that you have to do a million shapes, but can you give a safe boundary to people in order to find exploration and fluidity?
And I think how you said, you know, try moving your hip this way and see how that feels to open space in your lower back, so that ability to experience pleasure.
Yeah.
And I like how you cued us to do it ourselves and to try a couple ways until we found the way. So you were in charge of finding it yourself and not just, okay, move your right hip forward and your left hip back. Now you've created space in your back. Doesn't that feel awesome?
So if you think about this, is like the primary purpose of this chakra is connection, right? It's the connection now between physical and emotional body. So what movements can you make to feel certain things in the body, rather than at the, you know, when we talk about the root chakra, we're like, this is your arm, you can move it in all of these different ways. Now we're like, can you lift your arm and keep the upper back really broad, right? Can you feel space in the upper back as the arm looks up towards the ceiling? Whereas root chakra is like, this is the arm, it can do this, 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 and this, right? And you can do that. You are the only person that can make that movement happen. So safe exploration. Then I'm gonna say free flow movement. And again, that can be like, I didn't let you guys go totally rogue, where you were doing things, you know, all of a sudden at the beginning of class you're doing shoulder stand. I was, you know, cat and cow, close your eyes and be less concerned about what your neighbor's doing.
Right.
And do whatever with your hips that feel good. And if cat feels really good today, stay in cat for an extra couple breaths and cow for another couple breaths. Right? So when you talk free flow movement, I just want to be clear about that.
And then is that why you did the Nadi Shodhana too? Because it's connection of right and left?
So the Vayu related to this chakra is the Vinyasa Vayu right here on page 17. And so that covers the entire body. So the prana, we talked about this yesterday, but the prana has 5 different elements to it, and they're called the Vayus. And so they move energy in different ways, right? And so yesterday when we talked about the root chakra, that's Apana Vayu, which is down, right? That's our excretion, and it's a downward moving energy, and that's why it goes with the root chakra, which is like all of our elimination systems, right? And so now we're moving into Vayana Vayu, which is encompasses the whole body. So that's when we use Nadi Shodhana to balance right and left hemispheres.
Okay.
for practice, isn't this also a good place for the partnering in class? It doesn't happen here. At least I don't remember any of it.
Partner yoga.
Yeah, and I don't mean like do the whole class. I just remember some classes I've been in, you partner up and support each other in doing a pose, and you know, I've had short sequences of that in other classes.
Yeah, I think that could be first or second. I mean, it depends. I think so much of it ties into your vocabulary, right? Like, you could talk about the support, having the support of the other person, and talk more about the first chakra. You could, like, I think there's so many different ways that you can focus that. And I think that, like, I could end up teaching the exact same class, like nothing crazy. Like, I could teach just sun A's and sun B's, and I could focus that on any of the chakras depending on what my language is.
Right.
And the space that I create. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
A little bit?
I just was asking if, in addition to that, because I know that's what we're talking about now.
I think when we talk about poses, I think we think more about opening the hips on this one and creating space in the lower back. I think that's when we start to connect.
Okay.
I mean, has anyone ever had lower back pain?
I have it right now, that's why I keep moving in every shape possible.
Yeah, and it's SI pain. And it's SI pain too, right? And so it's like, what you feel like excessive movement, right? And then you feel also like this certain like rigidity in your back, like this like locking up in the back, right? And so it's when our lower back is nice and our sacral joints nice and free, we feel like there's this like safe movement in the body, and we do kind of find that watery quality then in the pelvis. Nothing's tightening up to like secure everything else in place. It's not like, oh my gosh, all systems have gone awry. I need to like tighten everything up.
So it was opening hips and what?
And broadening sacrum.
Broadening.
Broadening the sacrum, the lowest part of your back.
Got it.
How's your sacrum?
It's, the left side is not.
So movement through hips.
My second chakra is clogged.
And freedom and sacral joint.
Which is probably why I love being in the saltwater bathtub.
Yeah.
That connection to water.
And you're a pleasure seeker.
Maybe that's why the glass of wine in there with the energy.
So the last thing I'm going to say is that you reclaim the student's right to feel. Right?
Yeah,
So don't tell them how to feel. Reclaim their own right to feel.
Right.
Right? A lot of times as teachers, we can tell students how to feel in certain poses.
Yeah.
Right? And so, rather than saying, feel strong in your legs, like, give them the right to feel. With containment. Because if we know that this chakra too far, so if you're teaching a group class and you're talking about people who might be in excess, they're pleasure seekers, right? So you have to kind of find that right to feel with boundaries.
How?
Right?
But
How is exactly like when triangle pose. Like, can you move, like I'm giving you a direction of can you move your hip up towards the ceiling and then down towards the floor and the out mindfully.
Okay.
Until you can find space in your lower back.
Yeah, so cueing like till you find space and not till you find strength.
And not saying, can you turn your left toes to 45 degrees and turn your left hip point to point exactly towards your neighbor out in front of you. Right? I gave exploration, but not too much of those. Some people go totally in excess and they're like doing all these crazy free fall, and all of a sudden they're in a reverse triangle or something, right?
But the idea of going till you find space instead of going till you find depth or going till those can move into excess for people.
So you're reclaiming their right to feel, but you're giving them some boundaries as well.
You can't ever have too much space in your lower back. I don't think.
Yeah.
At least maybe trouble because she has a lot of space.
Yeah, totally.
She has to contain sometimes and not.
When you're giving birth, you probably
Yeah.
you have too much space.
What about, did you mention in that part, I had a note here of the importance of releasing the fidgets?
Oh, releasing,
yeah, we talked
yes.
about that a lot.